So the next story we have here is one that Joe is going to look at, and being one of our big data experts, I guess, because you kind of facilitate that in the back end on our systems, this is a good one for you to cover about a Zookeeper vulnerability.
Yeah, so Apache Zookeeper had a bug this week, and it sort of piqued my interest because we do a lot of work with open source database clustering capabilities, and Zookeeper is a cluster coordinator. It's sort of a layer on top of a cluster that you can report back to, and it keeps track of all the nodes. So it's definitely something that my team has worked with. So it was interesting to me. You know, after I did the investigation, I checked with our lab folks, and it turns out we're safe. So I don't need to worry about anything being a problem. So, but what happened here was that the guys at PagerDuty, which is a third-party operations team, they'll do your system management for you. They'll do some alerting. They found that in one of their clusters, they use Zookeeper, they found some unexpected spawned processes. So I think it was like a 10 or 12 processes that they didn't expect to see, and they tracked it down. They dug into it and did a whole investigation. They found it to be a poison packet that sort of took advantage of a length setting within the code base there. And their conclusion was that they found out they could take down the whole cluster with one of these poison packets, which wasn't necessarily the intention. They sort of just stumbled upon it. But
right, it was actually a bug in the way their IPSec wrapping was happening, and the TCP checksum. So there's a bug in the system that was creating this erroneous packet. It wasn't an intentional poison packet. It was one that was artificially getting generated in their system due to another bug.
If you injected it on purpose.
Yes, yeah. If you were a malicious actor, they uncovered a vulnerability in Zookeeper, that someone maliciously could exploit.
So it was a pretty cool investigation. It was a good read. Ars Technica picked it up off their blog, and they're saying that it's only an issue in Linux, the 3+ kernel, anything over 3. So if you're on the 2.6 kernel, you're safe. The Apache Zookeeper project has a fix in their 3.5 release, but that's only an alpha. So they're saying that in the 3.4 versions, it's not a blocker. But so if you're out there using Zookeeper, you might want to check to see if this is popping up if you're on the Linux 3 kernel. So
and when I was reading through it, the 3.0 kernel vulnerability, I think, might have been with respect to the fact that they were using IPSec, because they looked at the actual code, and the IPSec kernel code in Linux 3.0 says, oh, I don't have to validate if my TCP and UDP checksums are okay, because I'm just going to assume, I guess, that it's okay, because IPSec is wrapping around it. But all that being said, this is a really, to me, interesting, it's a really good read, because in the process of finding one bug in Zookeeper, they backtracked and found 3 additional bugs that progressively go all the way down through the operating system they were on, down into the Zen hypervisor that they were running under, down into the actual Intel instruction set that does some AES encryption, which is really interesting that they found this whole kind of chain of connection between all of this that bubbled up into this one bug. So it was a really, probably pretty hard to manifest. However, the real impetus behind it is that Zookeeper, as a software package, was not doing bounds checking on this one value. So they, like you said, initially they noticed, hey, we're getting packets here that say you need to allocate 1.7 gig of memory for what's coming in the protocol here, where really it shouldn't ever go above some smaller number. And then Java goes, oh, I'm going to go allocate 1.7 gig of memory. And they go, out of memory error. And then that thread died. And then the whole thing kind of cascaded from that point. So it's an interesting little bug. So even if you're not Linux 3.0 kernel, I would say check your Zookeeper, make sure that you're updated on the latest patch. Because that, one of the things I always say about development is when you're a developer, you should always do bounds checking, because you don't want to trust that what's coming up to you from the underlying operating system or your network stack is going to be true. And you need to make sure, always sanitize user input and even other things that come off the network, because we see that all the time with network protocols where they define what they're supposed to do, but people don't put these bounds checking in because they assume that the protocol or the underlying TCP layer is going to handle any kind of weird misconfigurations in a packet. So
it's always good programming practice.
Yeah.
It's just plain and simple.
But I was really into this, obviously. I was really into the story. I was like, wow, this is a really interesting one, because it was such an interesting chain of events, and the way they found all these various bugs all the way down through to the bottom level.